Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I am said East Forest. This week I have a conversation with Yolanda Charles. She is someone who I heard on Charles Eisenstein's podcast, and I so enjoyed the conversation. I thought it would be fun to see if she wanted to kind of continue it with myself. She's had a really incredible path as a musician and just a human being in life, but she's played with Paul Weller and Hans Zimmer and Mick Jagger, Robbie Williams, and many, many others. We talk about like all sorts of interesting things about music and how it relates to our path in life. And I did my best with the audio, and she did too, but we used her computer microphone sort of as a backup because the initial primary recording that she was doing locally ended up not working out. But you can still hear just great, and I think you'll sink into it after just a couple minutes, and you'll enjoy this conversation as much as I did. I do want to thank everyone who subscribes to the podcast, and of course, everyone who's given it a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much. Those 5-star reviews are easy to do. You can do it while I'm talking, and you can also leave a written review if you have a minute too. So thank you so much. And you can always say hi at team@eastforest.org. or say hi on social media, East Forest on Instagram, and East Forest Music on things like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and all that jazz. We're still planning on trying to do some of those live East Forest ceremony concerts, but we're eyeing a little bit more like the spring. But we have a couple events that are being talked about that people have asked me to might be a part of. So stay tuned to our mailing list, or just go over to eastforest.org/tour if you'd like to learn more about anything we've got going on. And thanks for enjoying the new possible release. We've got the second single is coming out. It's called Can't Fall Out of Love on April 30th. And we even put out a video for the possible single, well, the title track of the album that Stephen Como made. That's really cool. We shot it here in my studio when he was here at the end of the year, and so that just got released too. You can check it out on YouTube, East Forest Music. I'm about to head with Rada over to Esalen in Big Sur, California this weekend. We're going to be there April 23rd through 26th as part of the Entheo Wheel conference that they're doing. It's both real world and going to be online. So if you'd like to join us as part of this virtual retreat / conference / live stream East Forest concert ceremony, it's a lot of things. You can either go to my website or to Esalen, ESALEN.org, and you can see all about this event and see if you want to join. It's a lot of amazing people who will also be presenting as part of the event, including Paul Stamets and James Fadiman, my partner Marissa Rada-Wepner, and Justin Beretta is going to be there. A lot of people, many more. And so see what you think. And it's kind of diving in how we prepare and how we integrate and enter into spaces of ceremony. This one particularly focuses around psilocybin. So I'm about to get on a plane for the second time this year. And I'm excited, but it also feels like, here we go again. But we're not going out of the country this time. So I'm really looking forward. I can't wait to be around that mother energy ocean of Big Sur, California. It's one of the most magical places on the planet, that land that Esalen sits on. So this could be a really cool way for you guys to sort of be a part of it if you're not able to travel in person. And I can't wait to share it with you. And lastly, I just want to say thank you to all of our East Forest Council members on Patreon. We just did our monthly Zoom council, and I get to share extras from the podcast as well as things like unreleased music and other things that I can come up with as a way of interacting together and just going deeper. So if you want to check that out, please do. Patreon.com/EastForest. Also, if you just go to eastforest.org, scroll down on the homepage, it will be right there. That's about it for the announcements, my friends. I thank you so much for being here. Let's dive into this conversation with Yolanda Charles. Thank you so much for taking the time to dive in together. And I heard you with Charles Eisenstein who I've known for a very long time. And I just found myself, I felt very like opened and warmed by the conversation. It was something about the attitude of it, or sort of the exploration of it. And so thank you, first off, for just kind of sharing your own personal story in that space and how it inspired me. Because I'm very interested in kind of how we connect dots in our lives. And I think maybe I'll just start off with sort of a big prompt. Have you ever thought about, and this is, if people haven't heard your conversation with Charles, it might be fun to go here because I'm kind of bouncing off of that. But we have, this idea of destiny, and then we have this idea of choice. And you look back on your life, and you've had a very interesting life. And I'm sure you're thinking like, wow, like where I am now, I can look back and see all these constituent parts and choices and things that happen that sort of wove together, that if any one of those things didn't weave together, it might not quite have panned out how it did. But at the same time, you made all these important choices along the way. And have you ever thought about that and like how you reconcile, especially when you do have things in life that are like these sort of really interesting, amazing experiences, and how that lines up with like our role in it?
Well, I hadn't really, at the time I certainly didn't. I felt that every opportunity that came my way, or potential to go left or right, figuratively speaking, was always just something that everybody faces at different points in their life, and you make a choice there and then, and you don't really think much about it. You just then carry on, continue with your life, and that's just what happens to everybody. But then for me, especially during 2020, I had a lot of time for reflection, and as did we all. And I have been writing a kind of biography, as well as I keep a diary. I have done since about 1990. And I just kind of started to see this pattern in my choices, what felt at the time to be fairly random, and just, sometimes it was a considered, logic-based kind of choice. And then other times it was, I just feel like this is the right thing to do. And this pattern sort of evolved, that I could see that there was usually a really kind person at the beginning of the journey. Somebody who was being kind by just randomly sharing things, impromptu, just sending me little clippings from something they saw that then they thought of me, and, Yolanda would like this, so they'd send me a little clipping, or they'd invite me to read a book, or I even found things, those sort of loose friendships, if you can call them that, on social media, people who are following you, and you find on their timeline a little video or something. And that was actually that was the way that I discovered Charles Eisenstein's work, was on Facebook, which was just a random video from somebody that I didn't know. I had the capacity of followers on Facebook on the main kind of identity, but I didn't have a page then. And so I just accepted everybody because that's what you did. It wasn't a friendship-based thing at all. It was basically work for me. So if people are fans of musicians I work with, then I would accept them to follow me. So I end up with this very kind of wide range of people who are not actually my friends, who I've never met, sharing kind of random things. And a video talking about some of Charles' work popped up right at a point where I was reaching the end of my tether. Just sort of right in the middle of, I was in New York. I remember I was in a really nice hotel in Soho, and I had a day off, and I had met with
the Soho Grand.
Right, okay, really cool place to stay. And I was just looking through my Facebook and found this link to Charles', I think it was one that he'd actually done a commentary over. He wasn't on the video, it was just those lovely, beautiful images talking about the beautiful world. And it resonated with me, the way that you say you hear something and it resonates with you, it opens you. And that was in 2017. And I'm a bit of I don't know how you describe what I do, but I tend to be led by things. So if I find something that piques my interest, I follow that. As soon as I get a sense of excitement or curiosity is sparked, I never let that go. I wonder what that is. I'm always thinking, oh, that's really fantastic. That's fascinating. What's that? So I won't just watch a video. I'll look at who the author was, or the narrator, or, you know, the person, the director. Or I'll look at a scene that really struck me in a show or a film or video, and I'll look at the actual location online and discover things. And it's what I've done in my life. And that was the thing that I've worked out or realised in the past year or two, was my propensity or habit of being a bit of an investigator, a curiosity-led, fascinated by life kind of person. And so when something does actually pique my curiosity, I go in. So I went in on Charles's work, and it was a real moment of change for me, because I had been very, I think, myopic. I'd been caught up looking at, in a short-sighted way at life, and I was feeling overwhelmed by all of my responsibilities, and touring, being away from home, being mum. And I didn't really look up much at the world for about, I'd say, well, felt like ever, but I think since my childhood, really. And yeah, I was very caught up. I became a mum at 25, which is quite young compared to most of my friends. And in the trend of today, it's not really the thing to have to start a family young. In my social circle, it wasn't anyway. So I was one of the younger ones. I didn't have any peers before, you know, to help me along the way. And then also being a mother and working as a musician, female musician, as an instrumentalist, not an artist. Very different position. You're one of the guys.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been, in fact, we've got to come back to that, because I was having a chat with a friend today, and it's partially because I discovered Bill Plotkin's work on your podcast, which is... Oh,
really? Another clue?
Yeah.
He's amazing. Yeah.
He describes, I think he characterises these gifts as breadcrumbs, actually, as well.
Really? Wow.
But yeah, which when I read that, I was like, oh my God, that's me. I'm a breadcrumb person. I know when to stop and not get led off the edge of the cliff, though. You know, it's just like, you know, I'm not completely into going down rabbit holes, but I do look further than my nose when it comes to things. And so Charles's work opened me up to really picking up where I left off just before I became a mother at 25, and then full on into being a touring professional, and not really having any time much from anything much else besides parenthood and my career. And I felt like I'd just kind of become awake again after having been completely led by curiosity and fascination of life up to that point, and then rediscovering my personal love of nature and exploration in that area. That's what began, really, was just looking at environmental stuff. And I actually I took a course in environmental studies at Open University. The following year, I think I started it, or the year after, actually. But anyway, yeah, I began some formal study because I left school early, so I didn't have any formal education past age of 18. And it just fed into my absolute respect, love of life, appreciation of my fellow humankind, not looking at my feet so much, looking up out at the world. And then actually, what was great about all of that was just discovering that my approach and my attitude to life, it actually exists within the way that I approach playing my instrument too. But I didn't see the connection until I started to see the parallels of how
Tell me more.
Well, yeah, it's great to actually have the opportunity to talk about music, but in the context of the my wider appreciation of life, because I'm invited to speak about music, and that can be either quite technical or very career-oriented, but not so much kind of connected to what people would call spirituality or, you know, being plugged in to other systems.
And creativity, yeah.
And I really do feel a connection with the way that I use music and the way music uses me to express myself. And I've discovered through how I now am able to look at my approach to music that it's a great way to communicate other ideas by talking about how to approach communicating with musicians, for instance, in a musical setting. So one of the things I like to talk about is ebb and flow. Is it all right to just segue into this? Because, it's...
There's no agenda. Yeah, I mean, but I definitely wanted to, I talk a lot about and explore creativity and inspiration and, just sort of a life journey, and how it all intersects to me is super fascinating, because I really see creativity as this essence of what it means to be human for all of us. And so for the ones of us who've kind of really dove in and made it into like a lifestyle and a career and a job, you can start to really find like all these different discoveries about like, connecting dots with other parts of your life. So I'm super interested in this idea of like how you're led in life and how those are kind of like gifts and breadcrumbs, and like, where does that come from? How do you connect to that? How do you dance with that? And then how it leads into music? Well,
this is the thing. I think that this idea of separation that we see in society in a wider sense, and then polarization and the them and the us kind of attitude. There's essence of that kind of approach within music and within genres too. And I've seen this separation because I straddle different genres. I play some jazz, I play some pop, and I also straddle over into the classical arena through my work with Hans Zimmer and other sessions that I do. So I've worked with orchestras as well. And I also teach, so I work in the education field. And I see this separation that needs to be bridged, because I feel that there's a real there's a sense of lacking of being able to tie in what makes classical music so great, work so well, into how pop music can be expressed, or the way jazz has improvisational elements to it that is about communication that could be added to potentially to the classical world in a different way than a conductor, etc., or in pop. So it's the genre kind of side of things. I've been looking at that quite a lot. And one of the things I really like talking about is the way when I watch an orchestra or when I listen to an orchestra, the pulse within the meter, the timing, is an alive animal. It's not a structure, a fixed structure. It's a breathing and living structure. And it breathes based on dynamics, the loud and the soft. And on the intensity is conveyed by the holding back of delivering a cadence or a downbeat to say, here is the place we've arrived at. That pause beforehand that creates tension and allows a bit of drama of suspension. And then you get the release of delivering the message you were building up to, and the audience is a way of building up to that. That's so present in classical music. And it's written in a lot of the times to the score. So a really good conductor will become part of the orchestra where he coaxes or she coaxes a performance that is reflecting the feeling of the conductor and the feeling that the conductor wants to convey to an audience. And so I would imagine, when I haven't seen orchestras live, but I've heard them being recorded and been part of the orchestra. And ideally, not in the situations I've been on, because we've been working to an electronic click, which is, brought us into a specific meter. But when it's free of that kind of restriction, I would imagine that an orchestra wouldn't sound the same every night, because the conductor would be doing very slightly different things and creating different energies at different times. Now, that's one thing that I really respect, well, amongst many, in classical music, which is this aliveness in the music, and it's not spontaneous in respect of the notes are written as they're written, and things must play out as they've been pre-designed. But there is this feeling of, I can't think of a better word than aliveness when I listen to a really good orchestra.
That's not what you normally would hear, right? It's like we think of classical music as more rigid and predetermined. Like I would think that more about really jazz or even just like a good modern rock or pop, like any band that's like really like listening and responding to one another versus like going through a conductor that's translating it into that aliveness. So that's, you saw Hans Zimmer's work as classical in your mind, even I'd say it's probably spanning a few genres at once, most likely.
Well, my experience that I'm talking about here is probably more in the classical field, because with Hans we work to this electronic meter, the click, the silent conductor, and that's rigid. That's fixed.
Right.
We have a certain amount of movement available in certain places, but it's got less of the ebb and flow. It's more dynamic space, that one, as opposed to time. The time is more solid, but the dynamics are, more spontaneous sort of thing. But so working with the classical orchestra, even hearing that really inspired me, because I had or held maybe some of the similar opinion to the one you just described, which is the idea that it's more rigid in classical and more fixed, and maybe that you could look to other genres for more of this freedom of expression. But then I actually started to see the way that an orchestra plays, a piece as this animal, that's breathing and it's accelerating and it's slowing down, and it's all, but everybody together, 80-piece, 100-piece, 50-piece, whatever size orchestra, all unified and creating this really incredible energy. I mean, really, anybody listening, if you haven't seen a live orchestra, one of the good ones, one of the really good ones, get some tickets, go as soon as you can and close your eyes and just immerse yourself in the music, because you will be transported somewhere, and it's a changing, if you haven't experienced it before, you really be changed by it, I think, if you allow it anyway, hopefully. But yeah, I found that approach. I thought, hang on a minute, we don't do that enough in pop. Why don't, and in some forms in jazz too, especially now with there's a lot of bands that are using clicks, so they're using a electronic meter. Everybody's got headphones on, or mostly we play with headphones and in-ear monitoring now, don't we? So it's hard to escape this incessant tick tock 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 tick tock. You're trying to get into it, and there's this thing just hammering your ears, this electronic beeping. So I just thought, no, when I record my music with my band, I do not want a click. We're not going to use a click. We're recording it on, software like Logic or whatever, and Pro Tools. That software, goes down as you put it down, but you can work to a grid where everything's kind of, cut up into sections and easily manipulable, which everybody loves because it's easy to edit and drop in on performances, fix things, all sorts, isn't it? So I know that by not having a click, it would, disable one of the features of using this kind of way of recording. But I thought, well, if you've got eyes and you've got ears, you can still, make changes. It's not a big deal. So, and that is how we used to record before. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I was recording records on 2-inch at studios with analog desks because I'm a little bit older, and I've watched those guys back then. Mostly were guys with the razor blade cutting the tape.
Yeah, and if you want to punch in, it's like, okay, let's give it a shot, and it's like, and I did something to tape once a long time ago. And I remember I did the whole take, and they were just sort of like, "So what do you think?" And I was like, "Well, I guess it was okay." And they're like, "All right, we're good." It's like, that's it. I mean, we're just doing one big take, and okay.
That's right. I mean, as well as tape was expensive, those reels, so you couldn't just endlessly do tape.
Yeah,
tape
still is very expensive. Yeah.
Right. So you had to commit. So I like recording digitally, and I like mixing in the box, as they call it, when you mix. You don't use all digital, basically. I don't mind all of that stuff. But I did find that I wanted to use this approach of letting the music breathe with my musicians. So when we were recording one of my songs, I basically had most of us in the live room, and the vocalist was outside so that we could avoid any, bleeding onto the vocal track. And we recorded the whole thing live. And how we did it was, at the start of the song, there's no pulse at all. So it's all feeling and based on the previous rhythmic lyric will tell you what the next beat would be. So you'd have to be listening really well, because also we couldn't see vocalists either. So it's a case of really paying attention. You get a and I bang. That makes sense. It's 1, 2, 3, because 1 and 2 is established where 3 is going to be.
Yeah.
But if you're waiting, you get a little and bang, and you can just pause enough so that it creates this lovely tension, but it needs someone to lead that. So I was leading this pause of delivering this downbeat with my body. So I'm there with my bass, and I'm lifting my shoulders up with the bass headstock going up a little bit. We get the first 2 beats, which is like an anacrusis, 4 and 1, and instead of just hitting 4 and 1, it would be 4 and watch Yolanda, 1. And so you get this lovely little pause of 4 and bang. And that was done by us really watching each other. And I was semi-conducting, really, if you like. And we ended up with a recording that I just felt that there's no way we could have got that if I hadn't been thinking of the way an orchestra works, if I hadn't been really saying to the musicians, watch me, because I want to do pauses. And the pauses won't be specifically in the pulse, but they will feel natural if you listen to the vocalist. And I was sort of talking to them about how to do this whole thing. And then it sort of expands or parallels with how to do life, really, in a way, because, you can walk through life kind of marching, really, and have your predetermined steps that you may have planned based on an ambition or a course you took, or, someone else's predetermined or prescribed steps to take to achieve goal A, B, C, or D. And you're marching away to this beat almost of doing life. And I've never done this, never marched to any kind of pulse according to any predetermined patterns or guidance from anybody. I've kind of ebbed and flowed, and I've paused when I've needed to pause, and then I've hit the downbeat, and then I've run when I've needed to run, and then I've slowed things down again. And I've kind of done life like that, just waiting for the right moment, listening, then going, and then carrying on, keeping alert, waiting for sometimes just some indication that I'm on the right path. Maybe it will be a feeling or just somebody reinforcing an idea. And if I don't receive that kind of thing, carrying on or stopping, it's like there's a whole pathway. I could discuss anything I've ever done and literally describe when I waited and when I didn't, when I made a mistake because I didn't wait, or when I made a mistake because I did wait, all of that. And it's about how well I read the situation each time. And applying that as a musician is about how well you read what is happening with the musicians, which is a little microcosm of life, if you like, for 5 minutes.
I hear like you turned off the click track in life, in a sense, or never had it on. Right. And there's something in there about time and in sort of the rigidity of time, or our ability to bend and shape time, or just sort of not feel like there's a predetermined sense of like how we need to move through time, whether it's fast or slow. Mm-hmm. And I guess my question to you would be, how do you find that you learned how to know when to speed up and slow down and to follow versus to wait? Did you think that came from music, or is that sort of a chicken and egg situation? It's more of an innate gift you had, or was it something you cultivated?
I wouldn't say I deliberately cultivated anything really, but I'm looking at this at the moment. I mean, I can explore a little bit with you now, but it's not, facts-based at all. It's more like I'm trying to figure it out. I have a sense of my own. I've been, the what's that? Ian McGilchrist's book, The Master and His Emissary, is it? I think.
I've heard of it, but I don't know it.
Okay, so I haven't read it yet, but I was listening to a podcast of his, and he was a guest on, and I've been trying to, I read and absorb so many things at the moment. Just everything's pouring in all at once, sort of thing. I'm seeing a lot of parallels with the way I've lived, with the way things are described by others who have really studied these things, like Ian McGilchrist or Bill Plotkin. And one of the things that I noticed about myself is that I've lived and express my masculinity very strongly in my work because I'm a bass player and I live mostly in a man's world because the music business is dominated by men, of course. And then as an instrumentalist who plays bass, I'm always, most of the time, pretty much the only girl in the band. And if there are no female vocalists, then I will be the only girl in the actual whole group. And that puts me in this position of navigating that. And so I think I've really nurtured the masculine side of my character to fit in. And I don't mean masculine as in male. I mean the more masculine qualities of humanity, of human existence. But I didn't think I necessarily nurtured the more feminine side of my character. You know, I would actually be very aggressive and forceful in my job because it felt like the best way to establish a firm footing with people who might be challenging with me, or I was unconfident in other ways, so I would hide that lack of confidence by appearing to be strong, but really I'm quivering like jelly inside, sort of thing. So I would use these kind of so-called masculine traits to sort of create a situation of comfort for myself, and didn't necessarily nurture the more feminine side. But the more feminine side is supposedly, as I'm reading from these beautiful explorations by people like Ian and others, that this is the right side of the brain is the intuitive side more so, and potentially discusses the feminine, I suppose. Is that right? I'm not sure.
More, I mean, the right side is thought to be the creative side, the versus the analytical side, you know, on the other.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've always been firmly in the analytical side on this left. And I think, however, that despite what I think I was doing, I don't think you can suppress, repress or control whatever's supposed to happen. So if there is this balance of right side of brain actually kind of conducting things really, or actually inspiring the activity of the left side of the brain, then all along, despite me thinking that I was using my logic and my masculine side and all of that to navigate through life, I think all along, ultimately, the right side is supposedly really the actual master. And that was what I was actually serving all along, which was the intuition side. So everything that I was doing that was to do with, you know, enacting or enabling or making things come into being, that was this sort of more left side of the brain, actually analysing things and making them happen. But it was being directed by my intuition. I was kind of, what I'm trying to say is I was basically listening to it without realising that I was listening to it, is what I think. So that was not a natural cultivation. That was more of following the instructions I was being given, if you like, really well and very closely, but not really understanding the motivations, where it's coming from, or questioning anything. Just when I get this strong urge, instruction, then I go into action, get it done, get the job done, you know. And that sort of made me think of myself as someone who was a bit more rigid. And I probably did a disservice to myself thinking of myself that way, because actually I was serving the more intuitive ebb and flow, less living life to a click track type of life than I realised, you know.
Do you think that's shifting now for you, like your view of yourself as a woman in the music industry and the roles that you play? I mean, you've had so much success as a player, but it sounds like maybe over the last few years, you're bringing some kind of conscious balance into that, into like how you're approaching it with just energetically.
Yeah, definitely. It's changed hugely. I even had a bit of a shock the other day because I watched some videos of myself with my band from 2010. And that was a big moment of life-changing moment situation, because I just about to end my long-term relationship. So it was one of those big moments in your life where it's a before and after. And that year, 2010, I was watching videos from them, live performances. And at the time, I had prejudged or had always felt that they were terrible. And I really wasn't that bothered about dropping the band in a way because I felt they weren't very good and I wasn't very good. And I was really down on myself about it all. And I was judging it and assessing whether it was worth continuing, etc., on this kind of detached basis, not really remembering why I was doing it in the first place, which was because I loved it. You know, I put that aside. I didn't listen to that. And I just listened to the, is it good enough? Inner critic took over.
Yeah.
And I pushed it aside. I watched some of those about, a week ago. And I watched them with fresh eyes and realised that I'd really done such a good job convincing myself that it wasn't good enough. I'd convinced myself that all the reasons why I should quit were valid and that everything that I'd thought about myself was true. And it just wasn't. And I realised, so I realised that I am now able to see the truth of a situation more with less of me in the way, less of my problems in the way, less of my angst. Basically, I don't have those problems anymore. They're just gone. So now I can see things through eyes that are free of those prejudging, inner critic, terribly damning parts of my character that I had lived with up until fairly recently all my life. And I think that has allowed me to now embody being feminine, being female more fully, because when I was young, I used to be so terrified about being accused of playing bass like a girl that I didn't want to be thought of as a female bass player. I wanted to be thought of as just a bass player because that would level the playing field, and music is without gender, isn't it? After all, close your eyes and you don't know who's playing what kind of thing, which is true. But I also try to hide my body on stage and never wear feminine clothes and just be... I wanted to push down, hide that part of my character away from people. I didn't really want people to look at me, to be quite honest. I didn't want to be on stage. I wanted to play bass, but I didn't want to be looked at. It's not necessarily go hand in hand, you know. So that was all part of me trying to hide being female in that context. I didn't enjoy it. And through a very long process, I mean, I didn't have a problem with being a woman. I got married, had kids, and had boyfriends in my life, but it was just in the context of music. I just didn't want to. I felt that I think I became affected by the way that society has and still does to a certain degree perceive women as just not as good as men in certain industries. And I didn't want to be judged as not as good as a man. So the way to do that was downplay the femininity. And since I've kind of got away from those things, basically, I don't have a problem with dressing sexy on stage. I don't mind people calling me a female bass player. I don't mind being characterized in that way because none of it matters to me anymore, the way that other people characterize me now. But it took a long time to get past a lot of that stuff. And I think that my connection with my feminine side is informing my music because I'm allowing it to be. I don't know what it is. I'm not really sure I could describe to you in which way it's changed my expression, but it's just that I know that it's present now. I don't have any urge to suppress anything. I just am who I am now.
Yeah, and it sounds like a long journey to get there. And I could imagine another layer to it. I know how difficult it can be for any family or when you have kids and the life of touring. And for yourself, that seemed to be like your main bread and butter. Beyond session musician, it was like being out, performing. And then you add that other layer of like when you're the mother, and most of, if the men, largely men out there on the road and in bands, they might be fathers, but there's another like layer of being a mother of a child. I mean, Was that something that was just an additional, like, how did you work with that? Because you did go out a lot, and I imagine that was challenging.
Yeah, I think that I was able to do it partially because I didn't understand motherhood back then. So I was that young. I think as an older woman now, understanding what I do about being a mum and having had 3 children, my most recent child was born in 2006. So I do understand more about motherhood, and the early years are really important. I think I understood it on some level. Even though I didn't intellectually understand it, I think that intuitive knowledge is there somewhere. So I was very grief-stricken a lot of the time leaving my son when he was very small. I didn't have huge amounts of time away in blocks with my first child. I was really lucky that it was a few weeks here and there. I had a long period away, which for me at the time was very long, which was 6 weeks when my second child was under 2. And I think, she was 1. And she met us at the airport. She was with her dad meeting me at the airport, and she wouldn't come to me for a few seconds. It really hurt, really hurt. And then I saw a little light go up in her eyes, and then she just grabbed me really hard, and she would not let go of me for about 2 days. I mean, I couldn't put her down for 2 days. She understood something. She understood that I was back or something, and it was very heartbreaking. So it was very difficult. I think that if you are the only girl in the band, in my case anyway, I didn't want to make too much of those differences between me and the boys. So I didn't really talk about that stuff. And I didn't want any special kind of help for being, the fact I was female, because I was concerned, that those differences would preclude further bookings later, because they'd see me as a bit of a pain to have around on tour, because it's always this extra stuff you need to have when Yolanda's around, sort of thing. So I never spoke about these things, and I didn't have a mobile phone when I first started touring. So you'd buy a calling card so that you could save some money on the hotel room charges. You call a number first to get
I remember.
Right, okay, cool.
Forgot about that.
Right. So there was all of that going on, and choosing the right time to call. You had to wait till you were in your hotel room because you couldn't use the card. So it was difficult to stay in touch. No video calling, so I couldn't see my kids when I was away. Very different experience now. It's not great, but being able to see each other is amazing with these video calls and all that. I really appreciate it, but my kids are bigger now, so it's not such a big deal. But that stuff was really tough. And the thing is that as I got older and started working with older men, actually, they started to offer me, these extra things because I'm a woman that I never asked for, but they just saw it as a respectful thing to do, like a dressing room. And I'd never been offered a dressing room separately before. I always just got changed in the corner of the room or ran to the toilets, And if they were public toilets, you'd sort of try to be getting dressed while the punters are coming in, right? And they wouldn't know you're in the band, or if they did, then they'd try and talk to you, and you're trying to put your makeup on. Worse still, you're trying to get dressed, and you don't want to go in a cubicle half naked, and somebody's walking in.
Trying to focus,
So I'd never asked for any of that extra stuff. I just got on with it, just had to do what you had to do. So as I got older and I was working with more mature men, they would just offer me these really lovely kind of concessions, I suppose, and allow me to just have an easier time with it than I'd had previously, when I kind of needed it less in a way.
Yeah, I know how that goes.
Right. So I really respected it, and I actually, having experienced both things, I know that if any women are like I was back then, they don't want to have the differences between us made too much out of. I know that. I know what it feels like to not want any special extra things because you're female. But I have to say that I would say this more to men, that it would be nice if they would actually think about the differences and remember them that they exist, and that could they bear them in mind a bit? Because why is the music business male dominated? You know, if it wasn't so male dominated, if it was more equal in terms of presence of women, then those facilities and allowances would be built into the structure of the business, and it wouldn't be seen as an extra thing. But it's seen as an extra thing because there's so few women in the business. And so rather than appear in this current man's world demanding things because I'm a girl, it would be nice if men who are thinking about hiring a female musician to just think, she has periods. Maybe she needs access to facilities more often. Yes, we do, actually. And if we don't have them, we have to find a way, and it's not easy. But we don't let you guys know about that because we don't want you guys to think that we're difficult or a problem on the road. So we just quietly get on with figuring out how to deal with these things, deal with being a parent and being away from home and wanting to have a baby around, but everybody's a smoker and you don't want to ask people not to, it's all of that stuff. It's just, it needs to be thought of by others besides us actually asking for these extra considerations. And then eventually, if enough women are in the business, then those things will be built into the system anyway, and it won't be thought of. It's like the difference between making a building and building male-only toilets, for instance, or something like that, right? Or only urinals where you can only stand up to pee.
Yeah.
Because there's no women around, so you didn't think that actually you need somewhere to sit down. But then a woman joins the building and then they say, excuse me, I need somewhere I can pee. I can't pee standing up. And they go, oh yeah, right. It's almost like that. It's like until there are women around actually saying this is what we need, then those things won't be provided unless guys think about it in advance and provide them. So yeah, all of that stuff. I don't know how I got on to talking about urinals, but there you go.
Well, it does make you you go back to try to find the sources of it, and the fact that there's less women in the music industry, and you start to wonder, how much that relates to like motherhood and to things that perhaps aren't given like the kind of, they don't have the space that they need. I mean, some industries that's been more built in over time because it's of discrimination and protections, but not in the music industry. It's sort of the Wild West of like, you make it if you make it. And so that can be challenging or a disadvantage. It's like because women get pregnant and women bear this burden, if you want to call it a burden or the gift of our society of bringing forth new life into the world. And then the men sometimes get out there and they're like, well, we can take off in the world. And it's over many, many, many decades or hundreds of thousands of years, essentially. But here we are in the modern music business. It's created a kind of divide, particularly in the live music and touring space.
It has. It's, I think having seen younger women when I was one myself, picking up instruments, playing, learning, and then taking it to a next level, and then suddenly I'm looking around me and everybody's dropped off except me. Mm-hmm. You think, well, what happened to all of the girls? There weren't that many, but there were some. Where are they all? Why have they stopped practicing? Why have they stopped arriving at these points where opportunities can be given? Because they've had responsibilities that their male counterparts haven't had. Sometimes it's familial, sometimes it's looking after relatives. It's not always babies. Sometimes it's the responsibility of being a caregiver.
Sure.
And that's a balance. That goes into a really massively wider discussion about the, traditional roles of women in society, the way we look after our elderly. All sorts of things are built in there. And I think, women have shouldered the responsibility of being caregiver in so many other ways besides bearing children, that it really does stifle what creativity women actually have access to expressing, because it doesn't mean it's not there. It's just that there's the business side of creativity can be a bar to us, or can be barred to us because of these other things. I don't know what the answers are. I mean, I can only say that in my case, I was able to do both things, have children and be a musician, because I had support. I had my mother and my partner supported me physically with their presence, by looking after children, and supporting me by championing me also, and giving me that kind of support. I think without those two things, I wouldn't have had the confidence or the physical support to do both things. There's no way I could have been a parent and toured if their dad was just not supportive of that, but he was. So I was fortunate. And then also my mother was very agreeable about looking after the kids, wanted them to come stay. And again, that was a way in which I was supported. I think women who don't have that, they've got very little chance. The only other option they have is just to be paying for help.
Right.
And, that's not desirable. It's not loving. It's a transaction. It's not great. So if anybody wants to support any women out there and they want to see change, support the women in your life to help them do the things that they want to do, so they're not only kind of tied to doing certain roles. Take on some jobs that you see them doing, offer to help. Offer them a day off of a thing that they do so that they can go off and explore their creativity occasionally. It starts with everybody. It's not always oriented around childcare. Yes,
that's a great point. I also wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I'm curious about your, how do you practice, or how do you see what the edge is for you on exploring your instrument, getting better? Because when you play with lots of different people and being a session player, that's a really unique role, and you learn a hell of a lot, but you also have to be really good at what you do, to be flexible and try to understand what somebody wants you to do, as opposed to if you're just doing your thing, you're an artist. I'm for myself, I'm a little spoiled because I essentially get to just sort of do this one thing. I don't have to put on the hat so much and be all right, how do I figure out how they want me to play, or what kind of sound they're trying to get? But I'm just curious if you've come up with techniques or approaches to be that kind of flexible and open and get better at your instrument.
Absolutely. I learned quite early on that when I don't bring humility into a situation, that I come too pre-prepared, thinking I know what's required of me, that's when I don't do the best job. And I learned that quite early on. When I was in my early 20s, I was working for an artist called Paul Weller. And I'd come from a different scene, come from a sort of soul funk club scene in London. And Paul Weller's music he had various expressions of his own creativity, but he was currently at that point, he was in a kind of British rock kind of blues phase. So you'd be thinking Small Faces, I can't even think now. These bands, you see, they weren't bands I was raised with listening to. Cream, you think of Cream, bands like Cream, I don't know if you know these bands. Anyway, so I didn't know the music very well at all, just heard them on the radio, but wasn't an avid listener, and arrived to play his music with a kind of arrogance that it wasn't as difficult to play as funk music, which is what I was playing with my friends and doing okay. And I was in two bands that was touring, small level, but I was earning a bit of a living. And I'd just done a TV show, and Paul Weller had seen me on this TV show playing a funk track, which was a average white band track called Pick Up the Pieces, which is not necessarily the easiest thing to play on bass and for a newish bass player. And so he'd asked me to join his band from seeing me in that performance and then having the jam together. So then when I turned up to rehearsals, I realised that I was mistaken, that the music wasn't actually easy, and I put that in quotes to play. It had a specific style, specific touch, approach, even the way in which I approached the physical, which note I played where and where I played it on the bass needed to be taken into account to nail the right feeling. Mm-hmm. So we had a couple of moments where I felt that he wasn't very happy with how I was playing something, and he didn't directly criticise me. I just could feel that there was a bit of satisfaction. So I kind of just went back to the drawing board almost, and really I used that my right hand side of my brain told me that something was wrong. My left hand side of my brain found a solution, kind of thing, which was me going back and really analysing the heck out of what was going on in the bass part so I could figure out what I needed to do to make it more authentic to the recording itself. And so I did that. I spent an evening working quite hard on those particular tunes. And when I went back into rehearsal the next day, we played through those tunes again. And I could see his face was different. He was beaming. He was happy. He was a bit more like, yeah, about it, you know. And I could feel that I'd nailed it. Again, nothing was said. It was all just this kind of body language kind of communication. And I learnt massive amounts from that. I learnt to not think I know. Don't think you know. And that was, I think, that lesson of not thinking that you know is, I think, the most precious lesson I've learnt through life that I can apply to any area, really, is to not have the arrogance of predetermination or having your mind already made up, or thinking you know in advance about how to do something. That you have to, again, this ebb and flow thing, you have to be in the room, you have to breathe with the room, you have to see what's going on in the situation, whether it's in the song, with the person you're speaking to, with the subject matter, whatever it is, then just charge in and just like a bull in a china shop, just blare, me. Don't do that. That's what I learned. It was really useful.
It's a lot about expectations, and also like don't pretend you know where the breadcrumbs are leading. In some ways, it's like stay where you are, right?
Stay where you are and look and listen and be quiet for a bit and just watch and see what you get told by others through their actions, their questions, or their tastes, etc. You know.
Yeah, I'm sure you've now done that kind of experience many, many times over. And when you start working with like more and more like prominent artists that are probably quite strong personalities and really interesting individuals, whether it's, you know, Sting to Michael Jackson to Hans Zimmer, all these, it's. I think that would probably be maybe what people enjoy is like people who come with a lot of skill, and then they're so open to like, okay, what, you know, like what's being asked of me, or how can I serve? How can I do this? How can I bring my gifts and do it in a way that's like trying to discover that sense of beginner's mind of like, what are we doing here? As opposed to like, hey, I do my thing, I'm here, you know. And
well, you know, funny you say that, right? But that can kind of work, and I've seen it work for people.
Yeah.
That kind of, this is what I do, this is how I am, take it or leave it. I've seen that work for people, and I just think the mistake is when somebody advises others to do as I do. I think we know when we can assert our personality and character in a situation with very little mindfulness about what other people may want or not want. Maybe sometimes you have to take command, and you have to be very more forceful and say, this is what you're getting right now. And other times you have to be more, gentle with it and allowing. And it's not necessarily prescriptive for all situations. So I don't disapprove when I meet these people who will come in like, very strongly saying or doing or being. But I don't know if they are always aware of how allowing I might have to be for them to actually do that and get away with it.
Yeah, well, bass is a unique position too, because on one hand it's very supportive, but on the other hand it's like you do have a lot of power to change the sound and the feel, but it's in this middle ground, right? But it's not seen as like lead guitar or or as the lead vocalist, but at the same time, as you would probably know, it's like it's the foundation, but it also does have a lot of ability to shape and change how the music is forming and sounding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like I said, I'm writing a kind of, I keep saying kind of, I'm a bit embarrassed about this book that I'm writing. I'm not really sure if I'm going to put it out, but it's an autobiography, right? It's like, who are you to write an autobiography? So I'm always trying to deal with this kind of wrestle with this, who do you think you are thing? But then I think, well, I'm a human being. I've got a story just like everyone else, so why not tell it? So in this book, I'm actually writing about that very thing right now, which is the role of bass in music and then the way that I've navigated life, I see this parallel between the role of bass and the way that I interact with others. It's not always been faithful to the way that I play bass. I've played bass consistently the same all my life, but I haven't moved through life the same way. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've miscalculated relationships and, behaved in a way that now I would look back and see that I was creating tension in others or actually not going to get my desired outcome because I didn't understand what was going on. So I'm not saying I haven't had this awareness all my life. I've definitely evolved, I suppose, graduated into becoming more sensitive to how to be. But as a bass player, I have had this kind of skill of knowing my place in the music, when I can be forceful, when I can be busy, when I have to be laid back, when I have to push the groove ahead, when I have to challenge the drummer's pocket to get him to move to where I am so that things sit in a slightly different place to where he usually initially felt it, or when I can let the drummer just do what he's got to do and I'll move to where he plays because that sense of timing that he is adopting on the song is just working so great. That is never a fixed position. It's never a fixed role. It's always reading the room again and seeing what has to happen to get the result that we want, which is for the music to sound as good as it possibly could. And that is a bass player's job a lot of the time, to be the one that figures out how to, kind of influence, shall we say, the harmony by note choice, and how to influence the rhythm with the drummer interaction to allow this cohesion to happen between all the members, which only really works if everybody is actually listening to the bass player. So just saying to any musicians listening right now, listen to your bass player. Unless your bass player...
It must have been a trip, though, for you. Weren't you just about contracted to play with Sting, and he's known as a bass player, and then I'm guessing you're going to play the bass, and he's going to sing and play other things? Yeah,
at the moment we're talking right now. So, COVID's made everything so uncertain. I did sign a contract at the start of 2020. We were scheduled to go out in April, and then we didn't. Because nobody did. And so we've all been on pause since then. I have no idea what's going to happen next. So we'll see. I'm hoping that everything goes ahead as planned. But we're all paused and nobody knows what's happening. But yeah, that's going to be all speculative if I stop talking about that. But yeah, imagine being hired to play bass in a band where the songwriter and the bass player has hired you to play the bass.
Yeah. It's like if you were hired to play for like Paul McCartney or something, it's like it's unique because like, well, he's a bass player.
Yeah,
so he's gonna know how he's got an opinion. It's cool though too. You have like a unique communication about like really knowing the instrument and its role.
Yeah, I see music as music, so I don't expect I'll be able to play bass like Sting.
Who wants you to be you? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to respect the music. If I understand the music, then it will work. If I try to play bass like Sting, I'll probably fail. But if I understand the music and what music needs, whilst respectful of the actual way that Sting played all the bass parts, then it will work fine. I mean, I've been in that position to a certain extent before with Paul Weller, who often would record bass or write the bass lines on his own records. He used to play bass before he became a solo artist. I think he was playing bass in the Jam originally. That's the band he was from originally, the Jam. And then I think he ended up playing guitar for some reason. I can't quite remember the story. So he definitely has a bass player's ear, for sure. It really, he's a really great musician in a lot of ways, and so I was aware that he was very aware of what the bass was doing, and he liked it. So it was cool. That was it. It's just like, do you like it? Yeah. If you do like it, then there's no problem. If you don't like it, then tell me how you want to change it, and I totally can, because I've developed this sense, like you were saying earlier, asked earlier, about figuring out how to be flexible in all these different situations. That story that I told you about learning what went before so that I could play it as best as I could close to the record. That's just one element of it. The other element of it is getting control over your own playing so that you know how to shift your own pocket against a pulse. So if the pulse if the pulse is like 120 BPM, it's going tick tock 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 tick away. You know, I don't even know how close that was, but I don't want to test it. Maybe I'll be spot on. You never know. That would be great.
Sounds pretty close,
right? Oh yeah, you do EDM, right? So you know. Okay.
Well, I don't do EDM, but yes, we're talking about this genreless music. But yes, I do electronic music in addition
EDM,
to.
Everybody, it's not EDM. Okay, sorry.
It's not EDM. No, it's not Stevie Aoki.
No, it's not that stuff. It's not commercial, but it's got a nice strong pulse in the bottom. Anyway.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I actually, people would probably be surprised to know that I have a click in my ear because I'm doing looping, and my loop setup is locked into a click if I want it to be, and so I can turn it off and go free. I can kind of do either or,
right?
But I'm also very used to hearing that in my in-ears, and it is very like different than what the music is. You know, like it's this. But I'm so used to it now, and I can control its volume. So sometimes I have it super, super, super low, or I turn it off, or I bring it up in a section where I'm like, I need it. I want it. You know, I need sort of like a conductor in a sense. But it's so interesting, like all the things you're saying about time and about the tension and release and the aliveness that comes from essentially playing with time, and then about the pocket and how the bass and how that relates to the rhythmic elements and the melodic elements too. It kind of bridges the two, and how it's essentially ebbing and flowing and helping create and move the pocket, the flow, and the music's like in that flow. It's just what we're all kind of looking for, and even listeners, like we all enjoy it when it reaches that state.
Absolutely. It's in everything. It's when things feel aligned, and it can feel aligned when it's speeding up or slowing down or a little lumpy even, where you might, if you put it, say music that's been played, recorded or whatever, and you put a pulse, a strict pulse alongside it, you'd see that it wasn't actually strictly in time. Again, in quotes, I say those words. Right. But if you take that pulse away, it sounds brilliant, really perfect, just like it is, but it's imperfect against a measure like that. And I really respect humanness in music, and it's one of the things that I feel is slightly missing from modern performances now. It feels that the humanness has been kind of mixed out. We've got this awareness of our electronic overlord TikToking away. We're at the mercy of this TikToker, and I'm not having it. You know, I like the idea of the pulse is. I don't know if you can hear if I do this, but the pulse is here, and I want to sing. Instead of I sing on here, I want to sing on here. I sing on here, and I'm still in time, and the pulse is going, but I'm choosing where I put it. The pulse is there, but I don't necessarily have to pay much attention to it, just like you described the way that the pulse is going on in your ears. So you can just tap into it. This is actually why when the drummer has click, unless there's moments where there's no time at all and I have to play, so I then need a guide, I don't have the click if the drummer's got the click, because sometimes the drummer is hearing the click in a slightly funny place to where I would hear it. So I don't want to hear the click. I want to play to the drummer.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that allows the human feeling to reappear, even if the band is ultimately guided by this electronic master. But learning how to play alongside something that's fixed, and you move where you play very subtly. If you were to try and measure it, it would be less than a 64th of a beat. Just so that it just moves ever so slightly earlier or ever so slightly later. And I was trying to describe it like as a session player, the bass line, if we're talking about, you know, being successful and playing a lot and getting paid as well to live, you know, the bass line I've played the most frequently and most often, that's earned me the most income, has been eighth notes. So if the pulse is 1, 2, 3, 4, my bass line would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. So dun 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 dun.
Yep.
That's the most lucrative bass line in any bass player's career, right? But you might think, oh, well, that's pretty boring, right? Just 8 notes all night long. Wow, no way. However, if you add dynamics and you add time into that riff, you've now got, well, I wouldn't like to say a finite number, but I've definitely got at least 10 different ways of playing 8th notes that's distinctly different from one to the next. And that means that it's not actually so narrow after all. And how do you do that? Well, you think again about, what does the music require? Does the music require a sensation of acceleration? Do you want it to sound like it's got momentum and that it's feeling like it's speeding up while still playing to a very fixed click, for instance, that isn't speeding up? How do you do that? You might think, okay, well, I'm going to play ahead of the beat. If I play ever so slightly ahead of the beat, it'll make things sound like it's speeding up. But actually, it's a slightly more of an illusion how it can be done. It's not the only way it can be done. Another way you can do it is to dynamically play the second 8th note, the one and, slightly louder, one and, ever so slightly, or beat 2 louder, dynamically. So 1, 2, 1 and 2. So you play the 2 louder. Things like that in the bass line give a sense of forward motion. And you can do that conversely as well. Or is it inversely? I mean, so you know what I mean? It's like things like that, to develop that kind of left brain sort of approach again, which is where you're analysing how you do things, has given me a sense of how to shape a very simple rhythm, like an 8th note pattern, and turn it into a specific bass line with dynamics that has different notes in the bar, louder than others, that create a sense of time or rhythm or placement.
Yeah, there you go again. It's like making choices with time, simple things that actually are pretty profound in their impact and how that bleeds in to our lives, and following the breadcrumbs and being led. It's for me, it's easy to see all the parallels with music, but I think it's just so beautiful. And I think for musicians and non-musicians alike, it's just sort of an interesting analogy to just kind of look at how we're marching our lives against the clock of time, the click of time, and the simple ways you get into the groove, and sometimes you fall out of the groove, but it doesn't always take big actions to play with it and to make a big impact in how it all comes together, and like each of us is an instrument in a sense, and each one of those instruments can have a pretty big impact on the greater whole of the orchestra, whether it's like feeling it or not. And so it's a cool analogy.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the analogies I love is the triangle, right? So people laugh about the triangle. They say things like, they see a band like unloading from the back of a lorry or something, and they say, "Can I join your band? I'll play the triangle." Ha ha ha, right? And then I'm just thinking, you have no idea. Do you know how difficult it is to play triangle really well? It's about like holding on, gripping, letting go, and then banging the time at the same time. So you get a triplet kind of feeling. So it's actually got some technique involved. But the point I want to make is actually what the triangle does. It's the frequency. Now, it's a very small instrument.
It cuts through.
It cuts through. It sits in the mix. It will sit right at the top of the audio spectrum, where you can hear it. Just suddenly opens up your ears because it's at the top, and you can then start to hear stuff in the murkier mid-range area much more clearer, because your ears suddenly it's opened to hear this top spectrum stuff. And so a triangle on a track, in a rhythm track, has this really amazing function that actually feeds right through to your experience of listening to music, and affects the mix as well, if you're doing the mixing side of things. But you look at this so-called sort of simple instrument, nondescript looking, and, people sort of want to bang it and call dinner, make a laugh out of it. Not realising how significant it is. And I think we need to remember that we all can function like the triangle sometimes, We can be that instrument in the shape of things that helps to clarify a situation or a conversation or a relationship by just being that added extra bit of detail that needed to happen. We're not insignificant.
I love it. I love it. That's a great place to wrap it up. Be the triangle in life.
Great. I love it.
Thank you so much for taking the time. And it's great to get to know you and have a conversation.
Absolutely. And I've really, please forgive the EDM name
joking.
call, but I did listen to your music and I'm going to be following you and checking you out. And I hope I get to see a live performance one day. That would be great, right? Oh my God.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm hoping to make it over there. Yeah, I've never played in the UK, but it's definitely on the list.
Oh, yeah, we've got lots of dance festivals and stuff like that, and world music festivals and chill out festivals. You could fit in all three, really. You're in a great position to sort of serve many people of different genres, so it's great, yeah.
Yeah, lately I've been doing a lot of more pretty relaxed ceremony type concerts. They're quite acoustic sounding, and on recordings, my secret weapon has always been a live bass player. That's one of the things that I'll make a recording by myself, and oftentimes adding in someone playing bass live, it's just talk about bringing the music alive. And
that sounds
I've done that for many, many years.
I'd love to see that. And if you ever need a dep, just give us a call.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Well, how can people interact with you? And when you do finish your book, how can they find it? And
well, I have an editor, but no publisher currently. So that will be. I'm nearly done. I've got 93,000 words.
Holy cow!
Which is great. I've just a few 1,000 off. So I'm nearly done. So I'll be announcing that on the socials. But people can find me on Instagram, Yo-Yo Bass, or my SoundCloud. You can hear all my music for free on Yo-Yo Bass Charles. And I'm on Patreon. I'm always looking for supporters, because in this time we have very little income and everything, so that's always useful. That's just under my name, Yolanda Charles. So yeah, I'm just around, just various platforms. So yeah, people can contact me, direct message me. I really don't mind if people do direct message me because I do answer. I look forward to meeting people who may come across our conversation.
Cool. Well, thank you, Yolanda, and I hope to connect again.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me to speak. I really enjoyed it. It's so great.
Thank you so much, Yolanda, for taking the time all the way from London and sharing a bit about yourself and your life story and what you've figured out. And that's really what this is all about, is all of us talking about how we walk our walk and seeing how, what that kind of inspiration that sparks in us. This song that you're hearing in the background is called Her, the East Forest remix. It's the remix I just did for Trevor Hall. I also did a remix of his song Monsoon Cloud. And this song, Her, features Emery Hall in there as well. This just came out on his platform and my platform digitally, wherever you listen to music. I'm pretty proud of these remixes. We had Jake Saunders play the cello, and I just really wanted to focus it around Trevor's voice and create this kind of ethereal, mesmerizing compositions around that. So check it out in high glory, again, wherever you listen to music. It's the Monsoon Cloud East Forest remix, and Her featuring Emery Hall East Forest remix as well. Thank you guys again for reviewing and subscribing to the podcast, for sharing it with your friends, and for just supporting the project. I can't thank you enough to be in relationship together where I get to share work and you get to enjoy it, and then you share back and I share, and I just love it. I couldn't be more grateful that I get to do the medicine that works for myself, and it gets to resonate out there and hopefully be some kind of medicine for you too, in whatever way it works for you. That's kind of a circle of gifts at its best. At least I hope so. But thank you for being here and thank you for listening. In the meantime, I'm heading to Esalen this weekend because we're doing an event there, April 23rd through 26th. I'll be performing a live stream concert, and you can tune in, check it out, esalen.org. But then I'll catch you next week for the next podcast episode, God willing. Until then, keep walking your walk, friends. Don't take any shit, but if you do, do it with grace.